Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lora Rolling and this is part 13 of the Santa and his Reindeer ornament tutorial. This is the Santa and his Reindeer ornament that we are making. It is so cute and Christmassy and colorful. And today we're going to be making the unit called Second Top Snow. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 12 yet, that's okay. You can do these out of order. I'll have those videos listed down below in the description. That way when you finish this one, you can go back and watch those. We just have a few materials to get ready, so let's get them listed and then we can get started. Let's go. So the beads that we'll be using in today's video are Miyuki Delicas. I have opaque light sapphire and white pearl AB. Just to keep it simple, I'm going to call this blue and white. We'll also need some beading thread and a beading needle. I like to use the Eslon Fire thread in the color Crystal, and this is a 4-pound thread. You could also use a 6-pound thread in this project. And then I like to use a size 10 beading needle. If all you have is an 11 or a 12, that would work too. For implements, I like to use my long nose pliers to hold onto my thread at the end of the video. And then I cut my thread with scissors. And then today I'm going to show you how I use the fire method to end the tail. So all we need to do is thread our needle with about 3 feet of thread, and then we can get started. So I've threaded my needle and now I'm ready to pick up my first 3 beads. Let's pick up 3 blue beads. So now we have our 3 beads. Let's pull these beads down to the bottom of our thread, leaving about a 6-inch tail. Now let's tie a square knot. So cross over on the top and pull the tail through. And then cross over on the top again and pull the tail through. So now you have 2 loops that looks like a little snowman. We're going to put our fingers in the lower loop, the one that has the beads in it, and then we're going to tug on the tail thread and the long thread until that top loop turns into a knot. Now, I'm not going to touch the tail thread to the flame, but I'm going to get it super duper close so it melts the tip. And it turns the tip into this teensy little knot or bead. Now, keeping my fingers in the loop, let's pull on the long thread and twist the loop at the same time until that little knot at the end of the tail meets the long thread. Now let's take our thumbnail and pull that knot all the way down to the beads. And it turns the beads into this teensy little triangle, and that completes row number 1. So you'll notice that our knot is right in between the 2 beads. So let's tug it over to one side so it looks like it's coming out of one of the beads. It also looks like the thread is coming out of that bead. So now let's pick up 2 blue beads. And since it looks like our thread is coming out of this bead, let's sew through the bead that it's not coming out of. And then we'll try to get our new beads that we just added to sit right on top of their buddies, right on top of the beads that are below them. I like to call them the buddy beads. I don't know why, that's my little quirk. It keeps me smiling. Alrighty, now let's pick up 2 more blue beads. And we're coming out of this bead, so let's sew through the next bead, the one that we're not coming out of. And once again, try to get those new beads to sit right on top of their buddies. Now let's pick up 2 more blue beads. And we're coming out of this bead, so let's sew through the next bead, and this time let's sew through its buddy as well. When we're sewing through 2 beads, what we're doing is we're stepping up, putting our thread in position to start the next row. Making sure that those new beads are sitting right on top of their buddies. And now we get to start row number 3. Let's start with 2 blue beads and sew through the next bead. Now let's pick up 1 blue bead. And we're coming out of this bead right here. You'll notice the next bead is set downward. We're going to skip the downward bead and we're going to sew through the bead that's poking up a little bit. So we're skipping the down bead and sewing through the up bead. Now let's pick up 2 blue beads and sew through the next. Now we'll pick up 1 blue, skipping the down bead, we're going to sew through the up bead. Now we'll pick up 2 blue beads and sew through the next bead. Now let's pick up 1 blue. This is the last bead in row 3. We're skipping the down bead. We're going to sew through the up bead and also sew through its buddy. Sewing through those last 2 beads means we've completed our row, and now we get to start row number 4. Let's start with 2 blue beads and sew through the next. Then 1 blue and sew through the up. 1 blue and sew through the up. 1 white and 1 blue and sew through the next. One blue and sew through the up. 1 blue and sew through the up. 2 blue beads and sew through the next. 1 blue and sew through the up. And 1 blue. This is the last bead in this row, so let's sew through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 5. Let's start with 2 blue beads then 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue, 1 blue, 1 white, and 1 blue. Sewing through the last 2 beads, and now we get to start row number 6. Let's start with 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 white, and 1 blue. Sewing through the last 2 beads, and now we get to start row number 7. Let's start with 1 blue and 1 white, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 white, oops, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And this is actually the top of our triangle. So our triangle is not going to get any taller, but it is going to get wider on each side. So what we're going to do next is just sew through without picking up any beads. We're going to just sew through that next bead. And that puts our thread in position to start row number 8. Let's start with 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 white, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Now we have reached the top of our triangle again. So what I like to do is just turn it over, and now our thread is in position to start row number 9. Let's start with 1 blue bead, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 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 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Now you'll notice that we don't have an up bead to sew this last bead through. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn our needle in the opposite direction and sew down this white bead, the top bead right there. And then we will make sure that our new bead settles right in place where it's supposed to go. Sometimes it takes a little manipulating to get it there, but just set it right there. And once it's there, now we can sew down the bead that's right below that white one that we're coming out of right now. And now we're coming out of this bead. Let's sew in the opposite direction again, up the bead right next to it. And then we can sew up that white top bead. And then down the new bead that we just added. And now let's turn our unit over. And you'll see that our thread is in position to start row number 10. So let's start with 1 blue bead, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 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 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Now we need to turn our unit back over again, and that puts our thread in position to start row number 11. Let's start with 1 blue bead, 1 blue, 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 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 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 and 1 blue. And once again, we don't have one of those up beads to sew through our last bead through. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn and sew down that top blue bead and make sure that our new bead is set in the right position. And then we're going to sew down the middle bead in that second row. And then we will sew up the bead right next to the one we're coming out of now. And then we'll sew up that middle bead in the top row again. And down our new bead that we just added. Now let's turn our unit over, and we are now in position to start row number 12. Let's start with 1 blue bead, 1 blue, 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 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 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 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 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 and 1 blue. And that completes our 12 rows for our triangle. So let's turn it over. And now we get to start adding our connection beads. Now, if this is the first triangle that you've done in this project, you'll see that we add connecting beads along some sides, and then other sides do not get the connection beads. And those beads are so that we can connect our units together to complete the project. So in this particular unit, we are going to have connection beads along this side. We're also going to have them on the bottom, but we aren't going to have any on this side. So let's start our first side with 1 blue bead, 1 blue, 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 and 1 blue. Now we are down at the corner, and what we need to do at the corner is cap it and turn it into a little point. So we're going to add 1 blue bead, and that makes it into a little point, and now we can start adding our connection beads along the bottom. So let's start with 1 blue, 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 1 white, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Now we are at the corner again, so let's cap this corner with 1 blue bead, turning it into a little point. And now let's turn our triangle over and we'll sew up 6 beads. I like to follow this quadrant line right here. So through 1, we're not picking up any new beads. 2, we're just sewing 1 bead per row. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now we're going to do what I like to call a zigzag. So we're coming out of the top of this bead. Let's sew in the opposite direction down the bead right next to it. And then we'll sew up the bead right next to that one. Then we'll sew up the bead right above the one that we're coming out of now, and the bead right above that one. So sewing up 2 rows. Now let's do another zigzag. We're coming out of the top of this bead. Let's turn around and sew down the bead right next to it, and then sew up the bead right next to that one. Sew up 2 more rows or 2 more beads. And what we've done by doing 2 of those zigzags and weaving our thread through a lot of the beads is we've secured this last bead that we put on. So it's not going to get loose when we are connecting our units together. So now it's time to cut our thread. So we'll hold on to our thread with our long nose pliers, and then we will get our scissors as close to the bead as possible without cutting the bead, and just snip off that thread. And that completes the number 13 unit. We only need 1 of these units for this project, and don't forget to put a comment down below. Maybe put a snowflake down below. We always like to add comments in each of the videos. So let's do a whole row of snowflakes for this one, and I will see you in a sec. Thank you so much for being here with me today and beading along with me. Remember to like and subscribe and hit that bell button so you're notified when the next video comes out. I can't wait to see you there. Thanks for watching.